Today we're going to talk about arrays in C++. Now, an array is different than other C++ data types because it's not a single piece of data, rather it's a collection of data. What makes an array interesting is that it's a collection of individual elements of data that we can access individually or as one large group. This is similar to a Python list. However, it is faster and more efficient to access, but also comes with some limitations. So let's look at how we're going to create an array inside of C++. The first thing we need to recognize is that all the elements of an array need to be of the same data type. Let's take a simple example of this. Double quiz scores. Now, this creates a single element. However, if I want to make an array, I'm going to do a square bracket and the number of elements that I want to use. For example, 5. Now I have an array of quiz scores. You'll notice that a lot of times when I specify an array, I'm going to give it a plural name. This is just helping me remember the fact that I'm dealing with more than one element. This is the way I could define my array variable. I have to give it a number of elements. In C and C++, my arrays are fixed. That means I cannot add elements to it. I may not need all of my elements, but I cannot add additional elements to my array. I may not need all the elements in my array and may not use all of them. However, I can never add more. So I want to make sure I add enough when I create my array. Now, one thing that is pretty common that we'll see in something like this is in this example. I come up here and I'm going to create an external constant. Now, the reason for doing this is so that I can use this information later on if I need to. For example, something like this. Now, if I'm going through my project, I might need to change this. Let's say there's only 8 homework assignments. Anywhere where this constant's used, it now automatically gets updated and gets updated in one place. This is important because I don't have a length of type of method like I would in some other languages when I deal with arrays. Remember, arrays are very simple. All I do is store my data. So I don't know how many is there. That's up to me. I have to be careful of this. And we're going to see how that's going to affect us in just a little bit. This is 2 ways I can define my array variables. Let's talk about declaring them. Declaring them is when I'm going to give it a value. Let's use an example where I can declare my array, which means I give it a value when I go in and create it. This time we'll do an integer. Notice I'm still using my square brackets. And say equals, and then I'm going to give it a curly brace. Inside the curly brace, I can define every element that I need to use. This will automatically create an array, determine how many elements I need, and define it as that size. I can define a larger number inside of my square brackets if I need to, but I cannot define a smaller number, as it will cause an out of bounds error. So I can define and declare an array kind of similar to how I would with any other data type, but there are some differences. The other thing you may notice is when I declared my array, each element was separated by a comma. And that's very important to note. That's how it knows the difference between each element. If I want to go in and assign an individual value or read an individual value, this is pretty simple. So for example, I will go in and do something like cout attendance 2. Now, a lot of people think that this means the second element of my array. However, C++ is a zero-based array system. That means that index 2 is actually element 3. If I run this real quick, you can see here it prints 12 as my output. If I look at my array, I can see my third element is 12. This is because of how C++ handles the memory management when dealing with arrays. That means if I want to assign the first value, for example, to my quiz scores, I'll use 0 as my index. Much like that. And that's how I can define and declare my arrays, read an individual value out of an array, and set a value for my array.